Welcome everybody. Really excited for today's video. I'm going to be compressing 7 years of mental health coaching advice, basically as much of the coaching advice I can possibly think of for my entire career into a single hour. And I'm going to be sharing with you 20 harsh truths, but they're meant with love because I really want you to know them, and they're necessary if you're really serious about overcoming anxiety or any other complicated issues that you're dealing with mental health wise. So first of all, if you can hear me, if you can see that I'm here, go ahead and let me know. It looks like we're having some trouble getting up on Instagram, but on Facebook things seem to be working well. So just give me 2 seconds here, real quick. Also, by the way, if you guys have questions, go ahead and put the questions into the chat. And I want to make sure that I can answer those questions for you at the end of the appointment, at the end of the call today. All right, so I'm going to be going through my content, and then I'll share with you guys any answers that I have to questions that you have. Phyllis, I appreciate the feedback. Glad that I'm coming through loud and clear on Facebook at least, so that's good. So 20 harsh truths that you've got to learn if you really want to overcome anxiety and get the mental health that you really deserve. So the first one, just going to jump right into it, is that the biggest lie that we tell ourselves that prolongs anxiety and depression is that we are the problem, when really it is our patterns of thinking that are the problem. When we define ourselves as the problem, we are defining our problem in unsolvable terms. This makes us feel trapped, which is what creates anxiety and depression. So, very first thing that I want to kind of right out of the gate hit on is that a big pattern that I see that creates anxiety and depression for people is when they make something personal, when they basically succumb to a belief that the reason why they're dealing with an issue, the reason why they're having a problem is because of themselves, that they are the problem. And so, a classic example of this would be instead of saying, I made a mistake or I failed, we would say something to the effect of, I am a failure, right? Very big difference. Another classic one would be, let's say that you had some type of breakup, right? A relationship ended in a way that you didn't want it to. Well, you could either say, okay, well, the relationship didn't end how I wanted it to, or you could say, I am unlovable. Okay, and so basically what people end up doing without realizing it is they create what we call an identity statement. And an identity statement can be one of your best friends or it can be one of your worst enemies, because we always act in accordance with who we convince ourselves that we are. It's one of the strongest forces in the human personality. And so when you make up a belief that you are a particular way, then you will act and live and feel in accordance with that particular way, according to how you define yourself. And I've seen this to be evident in my own life many times, and also with my clients. In my own life, what I've done at different times is I have prescribed for myself a positive identity statement, basically saying something about who it is that I want to be, but that I'm not living in accordance with currently. And so if I want to be more confident, for example, then what I will do is I will say, I am more confident. So I will prescribe for myself a positive identity statement. And then what I'll do is I'll use that, I'll incant that, I'll basically condition my mind to adopt that new identity statement. And what I've found time and time again is that we end up living in alignment with the words that we start to speak out loud. Okay? And so when you become very attentive to the words that you put after the word I, you will start to change how you feel about yourself. And if you really want to overcome anxiety and depression, one of the first things we got to do is we have to ditch those limiting identity statements. It's very important. So what I have always looked at mental health as is that no, you're not permanently screwed up in the head. No, you're not destined to have anxiety or depression for the rest of your life. But basically what is going on is that your brain has a series of patterns. That's it. If you start to look at your anxiety, your depression, any mental health issue that you're dealing with as simply a series of patterns, not a personal problem, but a series of patterns, your whole life gets a whole lot easier, because patterns come and go, patterns change. Some patterns stick around, but they can be changed if you learn the right tools. And when we work with clients, that's all we ever do, is we just help them learn how to do three things: identify their patterns, interrupt their patterns, and train their brain to replace those patterns. That's it. Because if you can do those three things, you can become the master of your own mental health. And when you start to look at it from a pattern perspective, life gets a whole lot easier. This is one of the big reasons why I chose not to be a therapist. Because basically, well, first of all, I didn't get good results with therapy or medication. And the second reason is that therapists are trained that, if you're feeling depressed or you're feeling anxious, you're destined to feel anxious and depressed basically for the rest of your life. Like, it's just going to happen indefinitely. And I was never on board with that because I learned how to overcome anxiety and depression at a young age. And so I thought to myself, like, there's got to be a way to do this. And it was only once I started to look at anxiety and depression not as permanent, lifelong mental illnesses, like, okay, well, because of your genetics or your childhood, you're just destined. You're basically like your whole mental health destiny is completely determined. Like, I think that's bullshit, frankly. Instead, what I started to realize is it's a combination of patterns. That's really what it is. And so as soon as you start to address what those patterns are, then you become the one in charge of your mental health. And I think that that's a really critical thing. So if you're currently feeling anxious or depressed, don't blame yourself. Like, don't get down on yourself. That's the fastest way to spiral out and make it worse. Okay. Brutal truth number 2. If the only way you can win at the game of life is if everyone else plays by your own private set of rules, you will always lose. Okay, so there's this metaphor that I teach my clients. We call it the game of life. And here's basically the simplest way that I kind of teach it. Think about it this way. Think about it as you are playing in your brain your own version of the game of life. Okay, and all of us have our own version of the game of life. And for all of us, we have a particular set of goals, right? That's what a game has. There's a certain set of objectives or goals. And for some of us, the goal of the game of life is, I want to be completely, totally successful. For other people, it's, I want to achieve something big and monumental. For other people, their goal is, I want to get everybody's approval. For some people, their goal is, I want to feel love and be in love, and that's the game, that's the goal of life. If there's no love in my life, then I feel like I'm losing. Okay, and this is a big reason of what causes anxiety and depression, because if you're chasing after a particular thing that you value, that you've basically said, this is important, this is what my life is about, and you feel like you can't get it, that's what tends to create anxiety and depression. And what I've learned a lot of people do, by the way, I see all the comments. Phyllis, Kristen, Ben, awesome. Thanks, guys, for tuning in. If any of you guys have questions, put them in the chat, and I will answer. I'm going to do Q&A at the end of the session today, okay? So what I've learned a lot of people do is they play the game of life in a way where the only way they can win, as in be happy, is if other people follow their rules. So, for example, they might be chasing after a particular feeling like approval. And the only way that they feel like they can get approval is if everybody, agrees with their opinions, no one ever critiques them, no one ever raises their voice to them, no one ever breaks eye contact whenever they're speaking to them, they never get disinvited from a party, they get reached out to more than they reach out to other people, etc., etc., etc. Right? So people will tend to have rules, okay, as in expectations, beliefs about what should happen. They'll have rules about what has to happen for them to win, to feel happy in their life. But if you have too many of those rules that rely on other people, then you're screwed, basically. You're never really going to feel fulfilled. You're not going to feel excited. You're not going to be able to feel that you are the master of your own mental health. You're basically putting the power in somebody else's hands. And the other thing, too, is think about it this way. Imagine if I sat you down, I made you play a board game, right? You have to play this board game from the moment you wake up in the morning until the moment you go to sleep every single night for the rest of your life. And you must try to win that board game continuously, right? You can't just phone it in and, all right, I'm not going to do it. But you must try to win that game. But the only way that you get to win that game is if the other players all do what they're supposed to do. It doesn't really matter what you do, but all the other players have to do what they're supposed to do. Oh, and they have to follow your rules, but they all have a different set of rules that they're following. Could you imagine how absolutely infuriating and frustrating that would be? Could you imagine how triggered you'd be by every single move that person makes on the board? Because as soon as they go to make one particular move, in your head, you're going, that's not what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to go this way. And that's what most people, how most people live their life, right? Is they have a set of internal subconscious rules and expectations that they're putting onto other people. And they basically, without intending to, they've created a rule book for the game of life that says everybody else has to do what I expect, or else I can't be happy, or else I can't stand it. And so one of the key things that we always have to teach our clients how to do is to rewrite their rule book so that you get to be the one who's feeling like you're winning the game of life based off of your actions, not anybody else's. And that's what creates anxiety. Anxiety is, I must win this game, but I can't win this game. But I must, but I can't. But I must, but I can't. Because the only way I get to win the game is if these elements that are outside of my control somehow become in my control. That's what creates anxiety. Depression, by the way, is when you feel like you cannot win at the game of life, like period. Like no matter what you do, it's just not going to work. And that's what would happen if you sat down and I made you play that literal board game, by the way, right? You would like tune out. You'd go on your phone, you'd start scrolling on social media, you would like, kind of stare around, look around, because you wouldn't care. You'd be like, well, what's the point? I can't win. And that's what people do when they feel depressed, right? They stay in bed all day. They zone out, they watch TV, they zombie scroll on their phones. Why? Because they feel like they can't win, be happy in their own game of life. They're chasing after a certain set of goals and they feel like they can't reach it. And a big reason why that is they put too much power in things that are outside of their control. And that's a huge big thing. So if you really want to have fulfillment, if you really want to be anxiety and depression free, you've got to learn to rewrite the rules and take your power back, is what we call that. Okay, very important. I see some great questions coming in, by the way. I'm definitely going to answer these when we get to the end of the content. Okay, thank you guys for putting those in, though. I will address those. All right, brutal truth number 4. Focus equals feeling. If you are not feeling how you want, it is because you are not taking control of what your mind is focused on. Learning this essential first skill is the first step to mental health mastery. Okay, focus equals feeling. Well, what does that mean? All right, well, here's what that means. Okay, every human being feels anxious from time to time. This is what I call lowercase a anxiety. The example I always give is you're driving on a road, someone almost cuts you off, and you feel a little anxious because you felt like someone was going to hit you, right? You're supposed to feel a little anxious in a moment like that because it's unexpected, it's uncertain, you don't know what's going to happen, right? Fight or flight kind of takes over. But everybody experiences lowercase a anxiety. Why do some people, however, only experience uppercase a anxiety? And you know what I'm talking about. The type of anxiety that's repetitive, it's cyclical. It keeps you from getting on the highway or driving your car in the first place, or going on a date, or going to the grocery store, or giving your presentation at work, right? The type of anxiety where you're getting fearful about stuff that just doesn't even make sense to be fearful of. That's uppercase A anxiety. Well, why do people get that? Well, the reason why they get that is because their mind is continuously focused on, another word for that would be fixated on, something in particular that they're scared is going to take place in the future. Now, me saying that, you're probably like, well, yeah, duh, Ty, obviously. Okay, but stick with me. Hear me out on this. Okay, I want you to try a little thought experiment right now. Okay, just first of all, notice how you're feeling right this second. Okay, like 0 to 10, what would you say your anxiety level is right in this moment right now? Let's put it in the chat, by the way. Let me know. 0 to 10, what is your anxiety level right now on this very first prompt? Let me know. I'm curious. Okay, now here's what I want you to do. I want you now to focus on your to-do list. Okay, in fact, I want you to focus on all the things that you have to get done in the next 72 hours. Focus on all of the things you got to get done in the next 72 hours and focus on them all at once. Okay, focus on that and then tell me what number of anxiety does that create, 0 out of 10. As you focus on everything you got to get done, what does that create for you? Okay, now it's going to be a little different for each one of you, but I guarantee for just about all of you, you noticed anxiety level rise a little bit as soon as you focus on every single thing you got to get done in the next 72 hours. Okay, now let's try one final experiment. I want you to think about someone in your life that you love, someone you care about hugely. Okay, think about one person that you care about. I see all the comments, by the way, guys. I appreciate that. Carla said it rose to a 9. Okay, so now, third and finally, think about someone that you love. Okay, and what I want you to do is think about like 2 or 3 things that you really love about them. Okay, just take a second, take 10 seconds. Think about that person you love and think about a couple things that you really love about them. And notice what level of anxiety does that create for you, 0 out of 10, when you really focus on that person you love and what you love about them. Okay, now for just about all of you, you'll notice the anxiety level decreases. Many of you, you won't even feel anxious at all. Okay, so if you guys, as you focused on those 3 different things, if you noticed a change in how you feel, go ahead and put yes in the chat. Okay, and what I'm trying to illustrate for you is that when you change what you focus on, you change how you feel. Every single time you change what you focus on, you change how you feel. Now, if you're feeling how you don't want to feel on a repetitive basis, if you're feeling anxious, if you're feeling depressed, if you're feeling stressed, okay, whatever that is, let me let you in on a little secret. What that means is that your mind is habitually focused on the same shit all the time. Okay, can you guys relate to that? Let me know in the chat. Like, is your mind focused on the same shit all the time? Like, for example, if you have a fear of driving, what that probably means is that your brain imagines getting in a car accident over and over and over. If you have a fear of being out in public, you have maybe like your mind visualizes, or you hear some internal dialogue in your head saying, I'm going to pass out, I'm going to faint, something like that, right? But it's always something in the realm of future plus fear, okay? So if you can write this down, remember this. Whenever you focus on future plus fear, that is the formula for anxiety. The human nervous system cannot feel anxiety unless it is focused on future plus fear. It's the only way. Now, there are a lot of different versions of that, like focusing on what if I get cancer, or what if I pass out, or what if they dump me, or whatever, right? But it's always something in the future that you fear. But here's the cool thing. Focusing on the future that you fear is only one of basically an infinite number of things that you can focus on at any given moment. If I were to take a totally perfectly mentally healthy person, right, someone who feels joy and happiness, and I plucked them off the street and I sat them down in a chair and I said, hey, I want you to focus on something that you fear taking place in the future. And they were like, well, I don't really focus on what I fear so much. I said, no, tell me, what is something you fear taking place in the future? If I got them to focus on it, I guarantee you they would start to feel anxious. So even somebody who doesn't identify as having anxiety can generate the feeling of anxiety in their nervous system if their mind selectively focuses on the future that they fear. The reason why some people feel anxiety all the time or regularly is because their mind has a habit. Their mind has a habit of focusing on the future that you fear. That's it. It's just a pattern. That's it. Okay? And so the key thing I want you to understand here is that you can absolutely train the brain to focus differently. And this is one of the very first things that we teach our clients. So one of the very first tools, it's very simple, but it works really awesomely, that we give our clients in their very first week is we tell them to start asking themselves a new question. And that new question is, how do I want this to go? How do I want this to go? Because when you ask yourself a new question, you get new answers. When you ask yourself a new question, your mind focuses on something different. And so when you ask yourself, how do I want this to go, instead of what if this goes badly, your mind starts to focus in a totally different direction. And as it focuses differently, it feels differently. Focus equals feeling. If you change what you focus on, you will change how you feel. And some of you know this already. This is why a lot of you guys have developed certain coping mechanisms that are not entirely helpful to you, but they're the best that you can kind of think of. Like, this is why people go watch TV, why they zombie scroll, why they go for a walk, why they journal, why they go drink alcohol. Because if you do any of those things, it will temporarily change what you focus on. Now, you may not feel like happy, but you may feel less anxious by watching TV than just sitting around in your head. So what we've got to do is, instead of helping you go down and out of that pattern, we've got to help you learn how to go up and out of that pattern, right? And that means training your brain to have what we call an empowering focus, focusing on something that makes you feel how you want to feel. And one of the standard ones that we teach, there's like 5 or 6 that you can use, but one of the big ones is focusing on the future that you desire. So instead of future plus fear, future plus desire. Okay, now, by the way, this goes for all sorts of stuff. I'm not going to take a lot of time to go into, but like, let's touch on relationships real quick. What impacts relationships? Well, whenever I see somebody that's got, say, like a really bad relationship with their parents, what they tend to be focused on with their parents are bad memories from like 15 years ago, or something that their parents said, to them 2 or 3 years ago. So they're focused selectively on what they dislike about their parents, as opposed to what they're grateful that their parents did for them. Or they're not focused on why their parents did what they did in the past. Maybe their parents, that was the best that they could do. Maybe their parents were going through a stressful, difficult time. And that doesn't mean like everybody just gets excused for their behavior. Don't get me wrong, right? But I'm just saying that rather than focusing on the most painful elements of your human experience again and again and again, you can change how you feel by changing what you focus on. Remember this: problems need energy to grow. So the more you focus on a problem, the more it dominates, the more it magnifies, right? And this is why a lot of you guys have been stuck with anxiety and depression for a long time, because your focus is on anxiety, 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 depression, depression, depression. And the more you focus on it, the more you feel it. So you got to change what you focus on. Okay. Brutal truth number 5. By the way, if you guys are getting value from this, let me know in the chat. I'd really love it. I see some great comments here. Carla's got something funny there. Same shit, different day. I love that. Let's go to number 5, okay? So, without vision, people perish. The strongest antidote to both anxiety and depression is a compelling vision of the future. Okay, I'm speaking from personal experience here too. When I was suicidal, I had an attempt on my life that got interrupted, thankfully. And then I was hospitalized for about 2 weeks. I was medicated, put into therapy. And I remember being in the mental hospital, and I was still basically depressed. I basically felt numb, honestly. And really, I was just waiting to get out of the mental hospital to take my life, try to take my life again. And there was something that changed. What shifted for me was I met a young girl who had bruises all over her arms. And she told me that she was there because her father beat her. And that the thing, though, that surprised me, though, was she had this incredible smile. Like, she was not faking it. She really, truly emanated, like, real joy. And I was baffled by that. And I was like, I basically had like a little interview with her. I was like, wait a minute. I'm suicidal and depressed, but my parents have never beat me. Your parents are beating you, but you're joyful? Like, what the hell's going on? And I asked her, like, why do you feel happy? And I didn't piece it together exactly at the time, but what she basically said, what she was focused on was the future, not the present. Yeah, there was shitty stuff going on in the present for her, without a doubt. But what she was focused on was the future. She was focused on graduating high school, going to college. She kept saying like, well, yeah, this will be not so great for a couple of years, but this isn't going to be forever. And that's when it started to click for me that the difference between her and me was that I didn't have the compelling vision of the future. That was the problem. I didn't have a vision of how my future was going to be better. And when you don't have a vision of how your future is going to be better, you instantaneously feel depressed. When you have a vision of the future going badly, then you tend to feel anxious. And that's one of the big things that I realized. So one of the key things we always focus on with our clients towards the end of the program, when we focus on relapse prevention, is we've got to develop a compelling vision of the future. We have a whole exercise that we do that helps them map out a set of goals in each of the 6 areas of their life that matter most to them. Because without a vision, you'll perish. Okay, let's also talk about relationships, for example. Like, if you don't refine a vision for where your relationship is going, it's not going to go very far. If you don't have a vision for where your career is going, how do you feel about your career? If you don't have a vision for where your physical health is going to go, how do you feel about your physical health? Right? If you don't have a vision for your finances, where do your finances tend to go? Are you getting the picture here? You getting the program? If you don't have a vision of how it's going to go, how you want it to be, you'll end up getting a whole lot of what you don't want. If you don't focus on what you do want, you'll get a whole lot of what you don't want. And that's a really important thing. So if you can start to challenge yourself to go, okay, how do I want this to go? And what is within my control and power to make that happen? And I know it sounds so basic and simple, but if eating right and exercising is simple and basic, but most people don't do it, right? It is what will lead to the most healthy outcomes in the long run, but most people don't do it. And there are things, there are principles, there are habits, there are truths. That's the whole point of this video, is 20 brutal truths. If you really want to overcome anxiety and depression, if you're not just paying lip service to improving your mental health and you're serious about this, You gotta have a compelling vision of the future. And I'm not saying that's easy, by the way. If you've been eating shit for the last 10 years, if your relationship has not been doing well, if you just got laid off, if you are sick, like your health is not good, I'm not saying it's easy every single time, but I am telling you it is necessary. You must ask yourself, how do I want this to go? You must plant a flag in your brain out in the future of where you want things to go. It's critical. It's absolutely essential. Brutal truth number 6. Whatever you search for, your mind will find, even if it doesn't really exist. If you look for why you can't reach your goals, your mind will come up with a big list. If you look for why you can achieve your goals, it will do the same. Be careful what you train your mind to search for, because it will delete everything else. I want you guys to do a quick little exercise here, okay? In the room that you're in, I want you to look for the color red, okay? And if those of you guys who know where I'm going with this, don't blow the secret for everybody, but do this, seriously, do this. You'll get something out of this. In the room that you're in, look for the color red. Look for the color red. Try to find every instance of red you can find, okay? Quickly, do it quick. Look for red, okay? And if you're driving, listening to the podcast of this, okay, same thing. Look for red outside your windows. Okay, now close your eyes for just a sec, or if you're driving, don't do that. But if you're with us live here, close your eyes. Now try to remember what you saw in the room that was blue. That's going to be a little difficult, probably. You'll probably have no trouble remembering what was red, but it's going to be pretty tough for you to remember what was blue. Okay, now open your eyes, look for blue. Again, quickly. Try to find every instance of blue you can possibly find. You're going to be pretty amazed at how much blue you couldn't remember that you saw 2 minutes ago. Okay, so for most of you, just to skip to the punchline here, when you were looking for red, you probably saw a lot of red. You close your eyes to try to remember the room, all you could remember was the red. You try to remember blue, can't remember it. You look for blue, all of a sudden you see blue, and it was right under your nose the very first time. You were looking in all the same places, for God's sake, but you didn't even see the blue. How is that possible? The reason it's possible is because this is how the brain works. The brain has filters. And if you don't train your brain of what to filter out and what to filter in, it will do it for you by default. And so if you're dealing with anxiety, what's happening for you is your brain is constantly searching for, let's take health anxiety, for example. If you've got health anxiety, what's happening is your brain is looking for red, as a metaphor, with your body. You're scanning, looking for proof that there's a symptom, that there's a sickness, that there's an issue. And so every little tingle in your arm, every little gust of wind on your arm hairs or whatever, you interpret as a symptom of something medically wrong, when that's not what it is. It's a sensation, not a symptom, right? Or you are looking for all of the reasons why your career is going to fail instead of all the reasons why you could succeed. This is why people get stuck. Okay? When you get stuck, what it usually is you're just focused on the obstacle. And an obstacle is only what you see when you take your eye off the goal. Because if you keep your eye on the goal, your brain will come up with a lot of really good reasons and resources to help you reach the goal. So I guarantee you, and let me know in the chat, what is the pattern? What is the thing that your mind is constantly searching for that you need to train it to not search for anymore? You might be looking for what's constantly wrong with you. What bad thing could happen in the future? What painful thing happened in the past? What somebody did to you that was unfair? Those are some of the more common ones. And instead, you ought to be looking for blue. How can you accomplish your goals? What resources do you have? What unexpected gifts came from the pain of the past? What do you appreciate about the people you have relationships with, etc.? Okay, if you train your brain to look for something new, you will find something new. And so if you've been feeling stuck and struggling, feeling like you're not finding what you want to find in your life, it's because you're not asking yourself the right question. Ask a different question, you'll get a different answer. Look in a different direction, you'll find something different. So you got to train your brain, okay? Brutal truth number 7, the words you speak internally or externally become the life that you live. If you want a different life than the one you have currently, you must start by changing your language. I had a gentleman I worked with a couple years ago, and he was towards the end of my program. And he had already done 10 weeks out of 12 weeks. And he had gotten most of his anxiety eliminated. He really was at 80% elimination. But he really wanted to get 100% elimination. And I knew this principle that we feel things in accordance to what we tell ourselves. And so I was paying very close attention to his language and his wording. And what I noticed is that he talked about anxiety in the present tense continuously. He kept saying, yeah, my anxiety is like better, but it's still there a little bit. Or, well, my anxiety still gets aggravated here or there. And I had this idea, I had this hypothesis, and I thought for a second about why in the world is he still feeling anxiety, whereas I am not feeling anxiety or depression and have not felt it for over 10 years. And what I realized is that I only speak about anxiety or depression regarding myself in the past tense, as in I only ever talk about how I overcame it, how I'm done with it. I don't feel it anymore. It's over, it's done. And he was still talking about it in the present tense. And so I gave him this assignment, which a lot of you guys will have a tough time believing that this would really work. And I want to be clear, the only reason it worked is because he had already laid so much groundwork following our steps prior to that. But he kind of was at that last little bit of like how to go from 80% to 100%. So I told him this. I said, look, I want you to talk about anxiety now only in the past tense. I want you to only talk about how you've beat anxiety, you've kicked anxiety's ass, you've overcome anxiety. And he's like, well, what the hell are you talking about? Like, I felt anxiety earlier this morning. I'm like, yeah, well, this morning was in the past, wasn't it? And he's like, yeah, I guess so. I said, look, it'll feel a little bit like fake it till you make it, but just trust me. Like, speak to yourself emphatically, confidently, as if the anxiety is totally in the past. And he's like, well, what do I do when my wife brings it up? I'm like, tell her too. Tell her to stop bringing it up. Tell her you overcame it. It's done. Like, don't even talk about it anymore. And he did that, followed up with him 2 weeks later, and he was like, you know what? That is exactly what did the trick. That's what took him from 80% to 100%. And so that is just like one of like an infinite number of stories I could tell you to demonstrate this universal truth, which is you will feel whatever you tell yourself on a regular basis. If you change the language of what you speak to yourself, you will change how you feel. And the reason why you're feeling how you don't want to feel is because you have habitual language that triggers you to feel that way. And you're so used to it and so accustomed to it that you might not even notice. But there are certain words and phrases that constantly make you feel how you don't want to feel. So you got to get aware of those if you really want to be free from anxiety and depression. Okay? If you guys are getting value, by the way, go ahead and I would love if you could put the number, like which one of these truths is resonating with you. That would be helpful because the more insight I get from you guys on which ones of these like are really relevant, it helps me figure out what type of content to make in the future. By the way, helps me figure out like what you guys resonate with. Okay. Brutal truth number 9, blame always disempowers you. Blaming someone or something for how your life is currently will never make your life better because it makes you believe that the power to make your life better lies in the hands of someone else and not in your own. This I have realized time and time again, hundreds and hundreds of times working with people, particularly dealing with trauma. Helped people heal from trauma. I can't even count how many times. I don't even know. And even in my own inner work that I've done over the years, what I've realized is that the more that you can realize that the past is not the thing that is determining the quality of your present. It is actually you continuously focusing on the past that is dominating the present. That's what it really is. We don't get the quality of life. Let me say it this way. Your mental health is not a reflection of your life. Your mental health is a reflection of the life that you focus on. So if you focus on what everybody else has done to you, if you focus on all the bad things that have happened to you, that's what your mental health will be. Even if your life is actually generally good. And this is why there's usually a disconnect between people who feel depressed and anxious and their family members or spouses. Because for you guys who are feeling depressed and anxious, you can't seem to help but constantly focus on the pain, right? And a big source of pain for a lot of people is what other people have done to them. And it may not be a person, it may be like an event. Like it could be, like, oh yeah, I was playing football in high school and then I blew out my knee and I lost my chance to go pro, right? And, that person, so long as they put the power in the hands of that event of blowing out their knee, they're basically taking their power from the present moment, their ability to make their life how they want to make it here and now, and they're putting that power in the past. And so what that does is it makes them feel powerless. And depression is just a byproduct of feeling like you cannot make your life the way that you want to make it. So if I use the story of I blew my knee out in high school football and now I can't play pro ball and that's the only way I could be happy in my life, of course I'm going to feel depressed, because now I've created a narrative, I've created a story, I've created a model of the world that says I'm not the one in charge of whether I feel fulfilled. That event from high school is the thing that's in charge of whether I'm fulfilled or not. Okay, and everybody's got their own little version of this. It could be your boss, it could be your spouse, it could be your parents, it could be a mistake that you made 10 years ago. But if it's anything beyond you and your resources and your abilities in the here and the now, it disempowers you, because it takes you out of your ability to take action to make your life better. One of the key things we emphasize with our clients is the necessity, if you really want to overcome anxiety and depression, the absolute necessity to take a responsibility for your life. And what that means is the ability to respond. Okay? So yes, you blew out your knee in high school. Cool. That happened. That sucks. Every single person on the planet has had something happen to them that they did not want to have happen to them. And usually many situations, usually hundreds, right? Some more than others, surely. But point to me one single human being on the planet that has not had one unfair or undesired thing alter the course of their life. It's there. It happens to all of us. The difference, however, is the amount of power that we give that event or that person in the broader narrative of our life to determine our ultimate life story. And so the key thing I want you to remember, tattoo this in the innermost workings of your psyche. Blame always disempowers you. Always. Whether you're blaming yourself, or you're blaming another person, or you're blaming an event, or you're blaming the weather. Some people do that. They go, gosh, well, I'd really love to be happy, but I can't because of the weather. Here's my seasonal, affective depression coming in. Can't do anything about it. I feel depressed just because it's crappy outside. There's nothing I can do to improve my mental health. We've got to realize that we're living in a world where you're never going to have full control over every single thing that affects you in your life. But if you focus and magnify on the things that you don't have control over, you will absolutely feel deeply anxious and deeply depressed. If you instead choose to look for blue and look for, what can I do about this? How can I make this better? How can I use this to my advantage? What can I learn from this? What is great about this problem? Then you will start to become the master of your own life. Hugely, hugely powerful, important. I'm going to give you guys a little metaphor on this real quick, on this blame thing, because I think it's really important. I've been seeing a lot of this lately. There's a little metaphor I developed recently, and I think it kind of illustrates this point. So basically, imagine that you are entering into a casino, and you've got, let's say, 100 coins. You know how you go to the casino, they get the slot machines, all the coins? You got 100 coins. That's the coins you get. You're in the casino of life. These are the coins you get. You can do whatever you want with them. You can cash them out. You can go ahead and gamble with them. You can give them to somebody else. But that is it. You're not getting any more coins than that. And now imagine all of a sudden that you give some of those coins to your boss, and some to your spouse, and some to your parents, and some to your old high school football coach, and some to this girlfriend that dumped you in middle school. And all of a sudden you've given all these coins away, and you look down in your bucket, and you got barely any coins left. And now you look up at all of these people and you go, what the hell? All of you guys are holding all of my coins. And that's going to cause you to be angry, resentful, bitter, upset, sad, hurt, depressed, traumatized, whatever word you want to use to it. You're going to feel helpless. But really what it was you gave the power to that other person. Okay, now I want to be very clear. There are some instances where, well, first of all, it's not like you knowingly gave your power up. Okay, and in many cases, it probably felt like someone was taking the coins from you, right? Like if your parents belittled you constantly, it would feel like they were the ones taking your self-worth, taking your personal power away from you. And as a child, you didn't know any better, right? So I don't blame you in any regard. So this is not me yelling at children saying, hey, don't let your parents affect you. It's not that easy when you're a kid. Okay, but assuming you're a full-grown adult now, and you're not living in the home of your parents, it's time for us to take the power back and realize that you may have unknowingly replaced your previous abusers, and now you're abusing yourself. And the way that you're abusing yourself unknowingly is by making believe that they are still holding power over you, that they actually aren't. But it's the belief that they're holding power over you that causes them to have the power. right? And see, so long as I come up with a story that someone or something holds the power over my life, I will not change my life. I will not make it better. I will feel stuck. Hope that makes sense. Can you guys relate to that? Have you ever done that? Have you ever blamed something and kind of put the power outside of yourself when really you needed to kind of take it back? I know I certainly have. All right, so that's a very, very important thing we got to do. All right, brutal truth number 10. We feel anxiety and depression in direct proportion to how few choices we have convinced ourselves that we have. The good news is that the mind will always tend to convince you that you have far fewer choices than you actually do. To overcome anxiety, you must learn to uncover your blind spots, to open up new options for yourself that were there all along. Okay? This kind of goes to what I was just saying, right? If I make believe that my life is going down an unchangeable trajectory because of what happened to me 10 years ago, then I'm defining myself as having very few choices, right? If I define my problem as, oh yeah, well, I had a bastard alcoholic father, and because of that, I've never learned how to open up and connect and have a good relationship. Okay, I'm defining my situation as having very, very few choices. Okay, I'll give you a more practical example. There's a list of poisonous vocabulary phrases that we always give our clients. There's 6 of them. There are 6 phrases in the human language that increase anxiety more than any other word or phrase. And one of those is the word can't, right? If you are using the word can't, okay, I encourage you to think of can't as the new 4-letter C word and to abolish that from your vocabulary. And the reason why is I will bet my entire reputation and career on the fact that using the word can't never, ever, 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 ever makes your life better and only increases feelings of anxiety and helplessness. Okay? So if you use the word can't, what you're doing in that moment is you're convincing yourself that you have fewer choices. You're convincing yourself that you are trapped, basically. And what could make someone feel more anxious than feeling trapped? That's really all it is, right? Feeling anxious is really a byproduct of feeling that the future is going to go badly and that it is an absolute certainty that it's going to go badly. And when you tell yourself, no, 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 I can't go in the grocery store, I can't drive the car, I can't go on a date, I can't go to the gym, I can't, then you feel like you have less choices. When you feel like you have less choices, you feel more anxious, you feel more depressed, you feel more powerless. So one of the cool things that I love about coaching is I'm always helping people figure out their blind spots. I'm helping people go, well, wait a minute, have you looked over here? Why don't you just try this? Why don't you just do this? And I'm helping them think about things they've never ever thought about. And that's uncovering blind spots. As we expand your available psychological choices, you will feel more in charge of your life. You'll feel like you're taking the power back. As you feel like you're taking the power back, you will feel less depressed and less anxious. So be very, very careful to not convince yourself that you have less choices than you actually have. Okay? Brutal truth number 11. Problems need energy to grow. Once you starve your problems of energy, most of them will die automatically. Your mental health is really a byproduct of where you habitually put your energy. If you have bad mental health, it means you are putting more energy in areas that do not serve you than you should. So those examples I just gave are a perfect illustration, right? If I give this person power over me, what I'm doing is I'm putting energy in that. It's like having a browser window open on your computer, right? If I have a rule that says my boss should never talk to me like this, and my girlfriend should never talk to me like this, and my parents should have never done this thing 10 years ago, and the economy should be like this, and the president should do this thing, and the weather should be like this. The more of those that I have, it's like the more open browsers I have on my computer. And the more open browsers I have, the more lagged down the system gets, the less able to function the system gets, which is exactly what anxiety does. The more open browsers in the mind, the more anxiety. The more your mind is trying to close those browser windows, and you're running out of RAM, basically. You're running out of memory in your system, and so your ability to function goes down. This is why people feel an urge to like stay in bed or watch TV or do things that require far fewer mental calories, because the idea of going to the grocery store while you still got 30 browser tabs open on your brain of social anxiety is going to be really difficult. But a little bit more to the point on problems need energy to grow. What I'm also talking about is this, like, you ever have a cut on the roof of your mouth and you keep picking at it, and you know that if you were to just let that thing be, that it would actually heal just fine? but you keep picking at the damn thing. And so the picking at it is what keeps it from healing in the first place. That happens for us a lot of the time. Now, don't get me wrong. There is a time and a place for processing pain. I'm not talking about repression. I want to be very clear. Sometimes you need to get things out in the open. You need to talk about it. You need to vent a little bit. That's okay. But what I'm talking about is the constant, ongoing focusing on the same bullshit every single day. Like, my parents did this, or my boss did this, or the economy this, especially if it's something outside of your control, right? And especially if we're talking about like a trauma, like something from the past, where you've already done the processing on it. Someone did something unfair and unjust to you, and they absolutely shouldn't have done it. It wasn't your fault. You don't need to blame yourself for it, but what you do need to do is move on with your life. Like, stop focusing on that pain, because continuously focusing on it is only going to hurt you, not harm you. This is what I call the staring at the sun principle, right? Like, when we were all kids, we went outside, we looked at the sun, and we went, ow, that really hurts. And what we learned at a very young age is don't stare at the sun. And guess what? As an adult, if you have any brain cells, you probably don't go outside and stare at the sun, right? Unless you were like one of these people in the Midwest, like totally flipping out about the solar eclipse recently. Okay. So, but anyway, the whole point here is you learned it was painful. There's no good that comes from staring at the sun except pain. It just causes pain. So there are tons of situations where you actually are better off just moving it to the delete folder in your brain and saying, you know what? I don't need to keep rehashing all this garbage from the past. I'll tell you, for me, this was a lot of stuff from my childhood, right? And my parents are beautiful people. I love them. I got a great relationship with them. There were just some rocky things that happened in my childhood. And, that's the same for everybody. It was the same for them, right? It's the same. I don't blame them for it anymore. I don't hold any resentment. But there was a time when I was constantly mulling over every little detail, every little injustice. And the more you focus on it, the more you feel it. Remember? So changing what you focus on is another way of like deleting the garbage that you don't need to keep focusing on. So problems need energy to grow. If you stop focusing on the problems and you start focusing on the solutions appear. I know it sounds simple and basic, but it is true. It's really, really true. All right, brutal truth number 12. Okay, by the way, I haven't seen any feedback in the chat in a while. Are you guys still able to hear me? Is this making sense? Are you getting value from this? Can I just show me some type of reaction? That'd be really, really great. Number 12, brutal truth number 12. The past only has as much power over your present as you give it. Okay? If you define a past event or a past injustice as being the reason why you're in pain currently, I have a little bit of a wake-up call for you. All right? Let me put it this way. I'm going to suggest to you to consider an alternative way of thinking that has been very helpful for me. And that is this. It's not that the past has power over you, it's the meaning that you are giving the past that is causing you to feel that the past has power over you. When you become the master of meaning, you become the master of your life. When you give the past meaning that it is determining your present and future, that's exactly what's going to happen. And it's not that the past is actually grasping onto your present and future. It's the meaning that you're giving it. It's the belief, because certainty is what drives behavior. And certainty, another word for certainty, is belief. So if somebody says, yeah, I blew my knee out in high school football and I'm never going to be happy again, they have a belief. That's a belief. What that really is they feel certain of, I'm never going to be happy again. If they feel certain that they're never going to be happy again, do you think that they're going to take actions that would make them happy? Do you think they're actually going to try? Do you think they're really going to put forward effort? No, right? So we have to get rid of those limiting beliefs, those limiting meanings, particularly around the past, because it just disempowers you, okay? Thanks, guys, for the love in the chat. I appreciate it. Awesome. Let's keep going. I appreciate you guys sticking with me. I'm probably going to go a little over time, but I want to get you guys all the value I possibly can, all right? Brutal truth number 13. You haven't tried everything to overcome your anxiety or depression. You've tried the same 3 to 5 things over and over, and then you concluded that you've tried it all. In the world of mental health, effort is not enough. The right effort with the right strategies is everything. Okay, you can run enthusiastically east trying to see a sunset. It's just not going to work. And this is the thing where, honestly, my heart goes out to a lot of you guys, because the people I work with regularly, like they've been dealing with anxiety for years or decades, right? Like a common situation is someone who's been dealing with depression or anxiety for like 20 years, right? Most of their adult life, maybe a lot of their childhood. And they've tried the therapy, they've tried the medications, they've tried the journaling, they've tried the meditation, they've tried the breathing exercises, they've tried yoga, they've tried supplements. They're Googling every freaking day trying to figure this crap out. And they're still coming up short. And you know what ends up happening when we do that? There's a part of our brain that starts to feel really bad about ourselves. We start to feel like a failure, is my belief anyway. At least I'm speaking from experience. This happened with me. And when you try and you try and you try and you keep coming up short and you keep coming up short, your brain almost wants to conclude, all right, well, I'm just screwed up. Like there's something wrong with me, or I'm the problem. And that belief is a really, really painful, icky, gross belief. We don't like that. And so what I think we tend to do as a defense mechanism is we just go, oh, I tried everything. Yep, I already tried that. No. And so I experience this all the time. Like I'll do consultations with people and I'll be like, oh, well, what have you tried? They'll say, oh, I've tried everything. And I'll go, really? Okay, you've tried every single thing. That's interesting. You must have tried like thousands of things, because there are literally like thousands of different things that you could do that might have an impact on your mental health. So I'll say, cool, tell me, what are the things on your list that you've tried? And they'll say, oh yeah, well, I did therapy and I did medication. I'm like, okay, cool. That's 2 things. That is not everything. So this is another distortion that the brain will make. People make this lie up in relationships too. They're like, oh, I tried everything. Bullshit. You tried the same 4 or 5 things over and over and over, and you got stuck in your ways. And you did that for such a long period of time. And what you're really saying is, I put so much effort into doing the same ineffective things, and it feels like I tried everything. What you're really saying is, I tried bullshit for a really long period of time and didn't get good results. And that's a very different thing. And by the way, I'm not attacking you. Like, this is not me blaming you in any way whatsoever. Honestly, in the realm of mental health, if you have tried all of those things and you've come up short, I don't blame you at all. Like, it's not your fault, frankly, because the narrative that has been out there for 50 years is, oh, you're feeling a little depressed. Okay, well, take this pill and go talk to a therapist and do that for about 30 years and, maybe you'll feel better. And that is not a really good solution. That's not, I mean, it works for some people, but it definitely doesn't work for everybody. In our community, that's who we're dedicated to serving, are people who have come up short trying those traditional routes. So I just want to let you know, you're off the hook in the sense of, it's not your fault if you tried all of that stuff and it didn't work for you. That doesn't mean you're destined to have anxiety and depression for the rest of your life. But it is your responsibility to do the right things, figure out the right skills, the right strategies, and implement those. Okay, that is absolutely critical. All right, number 14, brutal truth number 14. It may be true that you develop some of your anxious patterns as a result of how others treated you in the past. But the truth is that they only have as much power over you now in the present as you give them. Most of us have replaced our past abusers as our own current abusers. And we abuse ourselves in the present in the name of our abusers of the past. And we continue to blame them for the pain that we are causing ourselves. I pretty much covered this one before, so I don't think I'm going to rehash it, but yeah, it's time to take responsibility. And when I mean responsibility, let me say a little bit more about this. What I really mean is this. Responsibility means that, sure, some shit happened for you in the past that definitely influenced and impacted where your mental health is at right here, right now. But let's just be clear about something right here, right now. How you think, what you choose to believe, how you choose to act, what you choose to do or not do for your self-care or your mental health, that's on you, okay? That's on you. And so that's the good news. Isn't that good news that you're the one that actually gets to be in charge of your mental health instead of somebody else, instead of your dad or your mom or whatever? That's the good news. Now, it may be true you may not have all the understandings and skills, and you may not know all the steps, and that's okay. That's totally cool. But at least start from the standpoint of I'm the one that's got to reach out and seize the tools, or I've got to use what I already know, or I got to go learn what I don't know, right? If you take the power back in your own hands, your whole life starts to change. I really, truly believe that is when your mental health recovery becomes inevitable, is as soon as you start that belief shift that you're the one in charge. Very important. Okay, let's go to the next one. Anxiety and depression occur because of what we tell ourselves. Excuse me, let me say it again. Anxiety and depression occur because of what we tell ourselves is most important, i.e., what we value. Okay, by changing what you value, you can change your entire mental health. All right, this is a whole big concept. I'm not going to take a ton of time on this one, but because this would take like 20 minutes to really explain the whole ins and outs of this. The thing, though, that I want to point out is that your values are one of the biggest things that impact your mental health. So, for example, let's use a classic example of here's a way to get a sense of what your values are. And go ahead and put this in the chat. I want you to answer this question. In your life right now, what is the number one most important thing that you are craving to feel? What is the number one most important thing you are craving to feel? Let me know in the chat. Okay, I'm just going to use the example that comes up to me from a couple of people I talked to earlier today, and that is approval. A lot of people crave to feel approval. Let's say that approval is my number one value. It's the number one most important thing for me to feel. Well, remember how I was talking about that board game before? Well, board games typically have a series of different outcomes, right? You first have to like go to the castle, and then you got to beat the dragon, and then you save the princess, and then you win, right? There's a series of objectives. In life, we also have a set of objectives, and those set of objectives are our values. And everybody has a set of values. If you don't think you do, I promise you, you do. There's a set of values that you're chasing after. And those values tend to be influenced by our childhood, like what we learned to value or to not value. And so approval, for example, if someone's chasing after approval, well, we already know that they're in trouble, don't we? What are the chances that you're going to get 100% approval in 100% of situations with 100% of the people that you interact with in your life? Zero. Not going to happen. So you're going to lose that game. And in fact, you're probably going to lose that game a good chunk of the time. And so when you change what you value, you change your mental health hugely. I literally just got off the phone with a woman half an hour ago, and we were changing her values. And the number one value in her life before was certainty. She wanted to feel certain, 100% certain and in control, and she wanted to make sure there was no bad thing that was possibly going to happen ever. How likely do you think it is that she's going to make that happen? Zero, right? There's lots of uncertainty in the world. And she was wanting certainty around all sorts of stuff that was outside of her control. So she was really anxious because her brain, remember, is trying to win that game. I got to get certain. I got to make it happen. But then coming up short. So we took certainty off her list. I said, look, if you keep chasing certainty, you're going to have anxiety for the rest of your life. And she's like, yeah, I get that now. So we traded that. We gave her a new North Star for her life. And what was it? Damn, I forgot what it was. I think it was like self-compassion. I'm pretty sure that's what it was. Like happiness or self-compassion. That is a game that she can win because at any given moment of any day, she can decide to be compassionate to herself. She can't control being completely certain of everything outside of her, but she can choose to be compassionate to herself. So that's a game that she can win. So that's what I mean. Changing what you value hugely impacts your mental health. I'll give you another simple example. If you are, I'll use an example from my own life. My mental health suffered for a couple of years because I really valued success. I grew up in a family where finances were tight and money was tight and like everyone was stressed out. And I kind of vowed to myself, like, I'm never going to do that. I need to have like success in my life. And I made a series of unrealistic expectations. And so what I realized is my mental health was great when I was successful. My mental health was shit when I was not successful. And it was because if that's the number one thing you got to get to win the game of life and you're not getting it, you may have chosen a very difficult value to accomplish. So if you change what you value, then you can make the game of life a lot better. Now, my number one value is growth. Growth is a lot easier to achieve than like this big giant vision of success, right? So anyway, change what you value. You'll change your anxiety and depression levels hugely. All right, brutal truth number 16. When you become the master of meaning, you become the master of your life. There's so much I could say about this one. But the example that I really like to give is a quick story. And this goes from World War II. Okay, so there was a Jewish psychiatrist or therapist, I can't remember, but His name was Viktor Frankl. I highly recommend his book. It's called Man's Search for Meaning. Very, very good. But he was a Jewish shrink. He got captured. He was put in a concentration camp. And what he realized is in the concentration camp, there were kind of two different types of prisoners, right? What he realized is there were basically two different types of mindsets in the prisoners. One group of prisoners basically gave up right away, and they died very quickly, usually within a matter of weeks or months, right? Very, very quickly. There was a second group of prisoners, though, that seemed to persevere. They somehow were able to last a lot longer. They were surviving several months or even several years in a couple cases. And he was very curious why that was. And what he did was he interviewed them. And what he found was that there was one single distinction between those two. The prisoners who gave up right away had a whole series of meanings that they gave to their situation, like, how could God do this to me? My life is over. This is torture. This is suffering, right? And by the way, arguably, yeah, that was true. Like, a lot of that stuff was true. But they kept reciting all of those disempowering meanings. And when they recited those meanings, they didn't feel an urge to even clothe themselves or bathe when they had the rare chance to, or to eat when they had the rare chance to. They wouldn't even do the things that the other prisoners would do to try to get by. The second group of prisoners had a different set of meanings to their situation. They weren't delusional. They weren't oh, it's all sunshine and rainbows, but they did have some version of an empowering meaning, like, I must escape. I must get back to my daughter or my wife. I must, in many cases, it was even anger, I must seek revenge, or I have to make sure this never happens to our people ever again. But they had some type of compelling vision for the future, whereas the first people did not. And that is a byproduct of the meaning that we give our circumstances. So when you give your circumstances a meaning of, it's all over, I can't do anything, etc., that's what you're going to feel is true. You're going to act in accordance with those beliefs. And when you act in accordance with those beliefs, you further reinforce the idea that it's all over. But when you change the meaning, you change your entire experience of your life. And that's really, honestly, one of the core things that fuels me in my work of what I do. Because I know it in my freaking bones that no human being on the planet has to live with depression or anxiety. I know it in my bones. If you're feeling anxious and depressed, it is optional, okay? And I don't mean it's a light switch, hey, just wake up and you're not going to be anxious or depressed tomorrow. No. I'm also a realist. What I know is there are things you must do. There are skills and systems you must learn to overcome it. But it is optional, because anxiety and depression is a byproduct of us putting a disempowering meaning on circumstances, when there is an empowering meaning. And that doesn't mean life is always sunshine and rainbows. That doesn't mean it's always going to go your way. It just means that the master skill of mental health that you have to arrive at, that you have to cultivate, that you have to commit to mastering, is the ability to derive an empowering meaning even in disempowering circumstances. This is what we did when my wife got diagnosed with cancer a couple of years ago. Right? And I've shared videos about that story before, so I'm not going to take the whole time to do it. But the long and short of it was, we had to take control of what we focused on, and we had to take control of the meaning that we gave things. And that's what enabled us to actually get through that with much better mental health than most people would have expected. So you can do it, but you've got to take control of what you make things mean. Brutal truth number 17. There are only two things that need to happen to heal from a trauma. The first is deriving an empowering meaning from what occurred. The second is refusing to withhold love from yourself or others as a result of what happened. Spending any time or effort on the past beyond those two goals is prolonging the pain, not accelerating the healing. I work with a lot of people who are survivors of trauma, physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse. And it's a real thing. It happens, right? It does. And the thing, though, to understand is that I learned there's been two ingredients that have been in place in every single trauma I've had the privilege of helping someone facilitate healing from. And it is these two things. It always occurs when there is some type of an empowering meaning that is derived from the set of circumstances. I'll give you a little bit of a shortcut. One of the exercises I take my clients through is a trauma healing exercise. And one of the questions in that exercise is, what unexpected gifts occurred from the trauma? And there's one example that comes to my mind. A couple months ago, had a gentleman, he had a trauma, not going to disclose the details of that, but He had been deeply depressed and anxious over it for decades. And it was something that a family member had done to him. And I asked him this question. I said, well, what were the unexpected gifts that came as a result of this? And he had a tough time with that question, as many people do, because your mind is so used to looking for red, it doesn't see the blue. But this question is a way of looking for blue. And so I stuck with him, and I asked him, I said, well, tell me about your own family, about your own children. And he has a beautiful family, beautiful wife. And I don't mean beautiful just like physically, I mean like beautiful in the sense of there's lots of love in his household. He had a great relationship with his kids, with his boys, better than the relationship he felt with his parents. And what I asked him is I said, do you think, or well, here's what I asked him. I said, why are you so loving to your children? And he said, because I know what it felt like to live without it. And I said, gotcha. I said, well, if we're going to blame your past abuser for all of the pain that they've caused you, we better also blame them for the beautiful relationship you have with your two boys. And that was the game changer for him. That's when he started to realize that maybe, whether you want to call it God or the universe or science or whatever, maybe that trauma was put in his life as a way to derive an empowering lesson. And I asked him this. I said, what would have happened if you wouldn't have had the trauma? Would you be the same type of father that you are? And he said, no, absolutely not. And I said, are you therefore, what if you could have it where the trauma never occurred, you never went through that pain, but then you also didn't learn all of the important lessons that you learned as a result of what kind of father you wanted to be? Is that the alternate universe you'd prefer? He said no. He would much rather have had the trauma, learned the lessons, and then gotten the unexpected gifts of his beautiful relationship with his children and feeling all of the love that he did as a result. And so he got an empowering meaning. And that's the key. We have to no longer define ourselves as limited because of the trauma. Yes, the trauma happened. Yes, the trauma was not justified. Yes, the person should be accountable to their actions. But if we endorse a belief that we are in some way broken, limited, deficient, screwed up because of the trauma, that we cannot be the masters of our own future, that's the thing that prolongs trauma. And so when we derive an empowering meaning, when we can realize that there was some type of benefit or resource, even if it was just an emotional resource, sometimes the emotional resource is just resiliency, okay? Showing you how strong you are. But that is why it was there, so that you can derive that. And that's the first step in healing. The second part in healing is usually when people go through a trauma, they come up with a belief that they did something wrong, that they are to blame, that they should not be loved, that they are unlovable. And the trick is to get rid of that and to reclaim the truth, which is that you are worthy. You are worthy of love. You are worthy, first of all, of your own love. And if you don't believe that you're worthy of love, then you're not really going to love. You're not going to feel love from other people, right? My wife would be so happy. I'm going to quote RuPaul right now. But, RuPaul has this quote of, if you can't love yourself, how in the world are you going to love anybody else? And I would say not only that, but how are you going to feel love from anybody else? Very, very important, very critical. Okay? Brutal truth number 18. Almost done, guys. We don't get the life that we want. We get the life that we tolerate. The same is true of our mental health. If you don't have what you want in your life, it's because your standards are currently too low and your threshold of what you are willing to tolerate is too high. This is probably one of the more brutal of the truths, but I am telling it to you because I care about you too much to lie to you. If you do not have the mental health that you want right now, it is because your standards are too low. What do I mean by this? What I mean by this is every human being on the planet has a list of what they want in their life, and then they also have a list of what are musts in their life. Okay? For example, let's take your physical body. Okay, most people do not have the physical body, the physical health that they want. But they do have the physical health and the physical body that they tolerate. Okay? There are two stories that come to my mind here. I'll skip to just one of them. I had a client a couple years ago. She had been overweight for a couple years. She had wanted to lose weight for a couple years. And all of a sudden, she went to her doctor, and her doctor told her, you're pre-diabetic. If you don't fix this, you're going to be diabetic, and you are definitely going to lessen your lifespan. And for her, she had a young child who was like in sports or something, and she really wanted to make sure that she maintained, that she was able to see, her child go through the sports games and whatnot. So anyway, long story short, as soon as she realized that if I don't lose weight, I'm going to die, it was no longer a should for her. It was a must. And that's when everything changed. Because she knew what she needed to do to lose weight, right? But before, she would get on a diet, she wouldn't stick with the diet. She would stick with it for a little while and then stop. And stick with it for a little while and then stop. But once she learned, okay, I'm pre-diabetic, she all of a sudden said, nope, that's it. I am not getting off the diet. She raised her standards. She changed what she was willing to tolerate. And it goes the same for mental health. Now, there are lots of different standards that have to be raised for mental health. And I am going to be honest with you, it's not just as simple as like, oh, raise your standards. I don't want you to feel like that. There are strategies, there are tools, there's guidance that you need. It's not just as simple as this, but this is one ingredient that you have to have. And it does, I really do believe, start with you saying, okay, I'm not going to tolerate this anxiety garbage anymore. No matter what, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to find a way to overcome this crap. That is the standard that we have with every client of ours. And that's why our success rate is through the roof, because we don't let a client go until they succeed. It is literally a prerequisite. We guarantee in writing, you're going to get your anxiety reduced by at least 75%, or we work with you one-on-one for free until you do. Like, that is our standard. Because that's our standard, guess what? We only take on clients who are willing to adopt a similar standard, and game on, it works great, right? And that's why its success rate is through the roof. So you've got to be willing to validate your own self-worth enough to say, I am worth this. My self-worth is present, and I know it, and I validate it enough to not deny myself of the joy I've denied myself up until this point. If you don't have as much joy as you want to, it's because you're tolerating having less joy. There are strategies, there are skills, there are systems, there are things out there, and you probably know of a lot of them that could help you. But if you're not going after them, it's because the standard is not high enough just yet. You're tolerating being uncomfortable, and that is a really not good place to be. So it's important to get out of that, okay? Very important. Brutal truth 19. We feel emotional pain in direct proportion to how much we focus on ourselves. If you look at any time you've ever felt deeply depressed, I guarantee it's because you were focused on either one of your desires or needs that was not met, or some type of pain that occurred for you. You were not focused on healing other people, loving other people, contributing to other people, growing, something outside of yourself. I've learned this time and time again. When I was deeply suicidal, I was completely, totally wrapped up in me, my pains, what other people did to me, what they shouldn't have done to me, what they said to me. It was all about me, okay? And this is not to say, I want to be very, very clear, okay? This is not the same as that old school thing of like, oh, well, if you're depressed, you're just selfish. I hate that talking point, because it's not that you're selfish. You're not a selfish person, but you may very well have self-centered patterns of thinking. Remember what I said very at the beginning? Don't think of depression or anxiety as it's you that's the problem, when in actuality it's just patterns of thinking. So you may very well have patterns of thinking that are focused inward as opposed to outward. And if you really want to overcome anxiety and depression, you got to focus outward. There's a woman I worked with recently. She's fantastic. She's an older woman, and she had been so focused on like all of this pain in her family and what people did to her and all this stuff over the years. And what I had her do is I had her come up with a list of 30 things that she could do that would either cause her to grow or to contribute or connect with other people. And there were simple things on that list, like go buy a Starbucks for the person in line behind you, go pick up litter, go donate to a homeless person, go volunteer, all these things. She came up with 30 of them, and I prescribed for her. I said, great, you're going to do one of these 30 things for the next 30 days. And she told me it was the best month of her life that she had ever lived, because as she focused on helping other people, as she focused on serving other people, all of the pain disappeared. She no longer felt depressed. And she felt the healing occur. So this is that classic example of don't keep picking at the cut on the roof of your mouth expecting that to heal it. You got to go focus elsewhere. Okay? Another example is in relationships, right? When we focus on our unmet needs most of all, the relationship suffers. When we focus on meeting other people's needs, the relationship thrives. When you treat the relationship as a place to go and get something, doesn't go well. When you treat the relationship as a place to go and give something, it goes really, really well. All right. Number 20, and I have a bonus for you guys. I have a brutal truth number 21. Okay, brutal truth 20. No matter your childhood, genetics, or current life circumstances, you absolutely can overcome anxiety and depression. But if you convince yourself that you can't, you never will. Most of the time, we prematurely convince ourselves that we just can't change because we are afraid of trying again and failing. But to be clear, saying that you can have exceptional mental health is very similar to saying that you can have exceptional physical health. And what I mean by that is, I really believe every human being on the planet can have basically good physical health. Now, don't get me wrong. Are there some people who have different conditions that make things a little more complicated for them? Yes, absolutely, right? However, for the vast majority of people, if not all people, can most people be in good, like basically good physical shape? Would you say yes or no? If it was really a must for them, and if they were really committed to doing the rituals and the habits and the things that really fostered good physical health, is it possible, right? And I think you'd say yes, right? It might be slightly different. We might need to customize it a little bit. Some people might have this little challenge or that little challenge or a pre-existing injury or whatever. But the same is true for mental health. Anybody can overcome anxiety and depression. And I'm not saying you're going to be perfect. I'm not saying you're never going to feel sad or upset again, but you can get rid of the cyclical garbage that's constantly like dwelling in your mind, that's limiting you. You can get rid of that. And the way that you can do that is to learn the skills necessary to make it happen. Implement a system. Okay, that's the real key. Just in the same way that if you want to have really, really good physical health, you can do it. But you must have high standards of implementing the habits and the rituals that foster good physical health. You don't get to eat ice cream all day and have good physical health. It just doesn't work that way. But if you commit to the right rituals and the right habits, then you can have the health that you want. Same is true with mental health. Your mental health is a byproduct of inputs and outputs. Okay, the current mental health that you have right now is just the output. And what you're putting in, you may not even be consciously aware of, but it's what the inputs are is your thoughts, your focuses, what you tell yourself. And there's a whole lot of other things, okay? There's like your habits, who you spend time with, how you spend time with them, what you focus on, what you value. There's dozens and dozens of things, right? That's why it takes us 90 days to help somebody deal with this. But you can absolutely do it. If you're committed to learning the skills, if you're committed to even more just than learning them, but implementing them, you can do it. I've done it. I've done it for over 10 years, been anxiety and depression free. I've had stressful moments, sure, but I've never slipped into depression or anxiety again. It's because I have high standards and I know the right systems and I've got the right skills and I stick with those. So success leaves clues. If somebody else has overcome depression and anxiety, doesn't mean they're any better than you, doesn't mean they're more special than you, doesn't mean they can do it and you can't do it. It just means you haven't learned yet what you need to do, or you haven't stuck with it enough. One of those two. All right. Brutal truth number 21. No one and nothing is going to change your mental health for you. But there are people who can help, but you must participate in your own rescue. Nothing changes if nothing changes. Okay, it's so true. It really is true. Everything starts to change as soon as you start to take responsibility. Again, ability to respond. Maybe your mental health totally sucks right now. Maybe it's in the absolute toilet. Maybe this is day one of your recovery right here, right now. That very well may be the case, and that's totally cool. Totally cool. Don't blame yourself, but now you got to take responsibility. Now you got to do something. Now you must choose anew what you're committed to, what your standards are. Okay, so quick little call to action for you guys, and then I'm going to answer questions, and then we're going to get out of here. Out of popular demand, we were full up on clients for the month of June, but we ended up opening up 5 extra slots. So we have 5 slots. I do see somebody else has booked a call even while we've been on this appointment. So 4 or 5 slots, we'll see what ends up happening. But if you really want some guidance to get your anxiety and or depression handled, then maybe now's the time. Maybe today's the day. The way we do it is if you qualify, if you meet our qualifications and we work with you, I individually work with you one-on-one until your anxiety or depression is reduced by at least 75%. And typically we get that in a 90-day period. If we don't get that in a 90-day period, I work with you one-on-one for free until we do. So go ahead and put in the comments, let's go ahead and have you put the word apply in the comments if you want to apply to be considered as a client. We can reach out, we'll set up a quick time to chat, and we'll see if our system would work well for you, okay? And let's go ahead and answer questions. I love the engagement. Thank you guys for sticking with me. A couple questions, I'm gonna go in order here. Carla says, what if my compelling vision of the future makes me feel overwhelmed because I think, oh, I'll never accomplish it, or it's too monumental for me to do? So Carla, when I say compelling vision of the future, what makes it compelling is it is a future that you desire, not a future that you fear. So if you are focusing on the future going badly, then that is a future that you fear. So if you're saying, I have this future that I want, but I keep imagining it going badly, then that's not a compelling vision of the future. What I mean is imagining and focusing on the future going how you want it to go. Okay, and the first place to start with that is being very dedicated and like systematic with asking yourself, how do I want this to go? You have to train your brain to replace the old question of what am I worried is going to happen with how do I want this to go? And you got to beat that into your skull a little bit, and then it'll happen. All right, cool. Lots of good feedback. I know there was another question in here. I saw another one. Oh, I guess that was it. I felt like I saw another one, but maybe there was another one. Jennifer says, I need to ask myself what gifts came from my trauma. Yes, I definitely agree. And then Jennifer, you also said, is it possible to get the 1 through 20 in a list? Yeah, I'll have one of my team members go ahead and type that up. We'll put it in the comments. So, yeah. Awesome, guys. I guess we're going to wrap up for today. Thanks so much. Tune in with us every Thursday, 6 p.m. Eastern, live in our Facebook group or on Instagram. And then we post these on our podcast Monday mornings. Okay? So thanks for being here. Chat with you guys soon. See ya.